Welcome to the bright side of longevity. Join Dr. Roger Landry and guests as they discuss the bright side of getting older through healthy longevity. Guided by research, this lighthearted and educational discussion will leave you with practical tips and ways to impact your lifestyle to brighten life's journey. California-born consultant turned photographer Doug Adams began his work on staff at the Peace Corps, where he trained volunteers to prepare for their service in Central and South America. After completing his master's with a specialization in organizational behavior from Harvard University, he worked as a consultant with McKinsey Company in New York and London, director of leadership development at Pepsi Cola, vice president at Computervision Corporation, and in 1985, Doug launched his own management consulting firm, MDA Associates, and developed an international practice working with organizations in over 30 countries. Fascinated by the diverse neighborhoods in New York City, he turned to photography in his retirement and has exhibited his work in Asia, New York, Cape Cod, and Boston. He is currently the board of governors of the Copley Society of Art in Boston and also serves on its art committee. In addition, he currently serves on the board of directors of the Harvard Club of Cape Cod.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the bright side of longevity. I'm here with my esteemed colleague and young sage, Danielle. Hello, Danielle.
Hey, Dr. Roger, how are you doing today?
Very well. I heard things are hot down where you are in Florida today. And
Yep. Real feel was 108 yesterday, 107 today. So stay inside where it's air conditioned.
Well, our guest spends time in Florida, but luckily he's a fellow Caper like me, Cape Cod, and he's where he should be in Cape Cod today. Doug Adams is going to join us. Doug, welcome. So good to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you and Danielle.
Doug and I work together. I'm privileged to have do some work with him. We work in scheduling events, but mostly we just get to go to meetings together and trade stories, not lies, I guess, just stories.
Probably a little of both.
Sometimes, but Doug, we're so pleased to have you here. We wanted to explore a number of subjects post-COVID, but you know how careers change and everything changed. But one thing we wanted to explore was COVID initiated a lot of earlier retirements than people expected, and it was also somewhat precipitous relative to the transition that some people went through. Here they were, going concerns, big jobs, high-powered jobs, many people, and all of a sudden that changed. I don't know how high-powered I was, but mine changed significantly, and so I'm familiar with that. But I think you experienced it exponentially in a greater way because of what you did. So that we'd like to explore what you were doing before and how you what the transition was like, and how what you did to get to the obvious great place where you are right now, and what role maybe creativity had in that also. So that's our goal today. Sound good?
Sounds great. I'm glad to be able to contribute.
Well, great. Well, then we should start with what you were doing. You were a management consultant, international. Could you describe what life was like before COVID and your career?
Yes. Boy, it brings back all kinds of memories. In fact, I just got chills. I worked in the corporate world for about 10 or 15 years. first of all, at an international management consulting firm, McKinsey Company, after I finished my graduate work, and worked around the world with McKinsey, and was there 3 or 4 years. And then I was recruited by Pepsi Cola to go be the director of leadership development for Pepsi, which at the time, by the way, had a reputation in the corporate world as being one of the best at developing leaders and executives and so on in the world. So it was a great opportunity. And I spent a number of years at Pepsi, and then I was recruited by Computervision Corporation, which took me back to Boston, the Boston area. And I was at Computervision for 5 years as a vice president. And in 1985, I decided that I wanted to leave the corporate world and start my own business. And so I can remember that one Friday evening, I left the corporate world, and my assistant, my administrator, my staff, all kinds of resources. And on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I went in our spare bedroom with a telephone, and that was my first day as an independent consultant. And as luck would have it, the CEO that I had just left called me and said, "Doug, we have problems in the Netherlands. Would you be willing to go and do, XYZ?" And I said, "Of course." So I did, and one thing led to another. And I had always been a natural networker. So I had a worldwide network of friends and colleagues and clients and former clients. So, and that provided kind of a natural marketing world for me. And things kind of took off. And I began to work for a lot of clients in the greater Boston area, high tech and biotech and financial services. And one of my clients quickly became Gillette. And I ended up working in 20 different countries for Gillette. And another Boston area company was Bose, the speaker company. And I got a call one day from Dr. Bose. He said, "Doug, I hear from my staff that you are a good problem solver." And so, make a long story short, I went out to see him and proceeded to do work for him and Bose for a number of years. I think one of the things that I'm most proud and pleased with in my consulting career was that a number of major clients, including Gillette and Citibank and Sony Music and Bose, was that I maintained those relationships for decades and did work for them over decades. And I think that was a testament to my work and building good, healthy relationships.
Clearly.
So I was doing work for the CEO of the time called The Limited, which owned 12 retail chains, including Victoria's Secret and Express and Bath and Body Works and blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Doug, I need you to come to Columbus, Ohio to run a 3-day workshop, team building for the 12 heads of their retail businesses." So I did. And one of the participants in that program that I did in Columbus, Ohio, was the chairman of their primary manufacturer, which was in Sri Lanka. And at the end of the 3 days, the chairman of this company came up to me and he said, "Doug, this was great. Could you do this for me in Sri Lanka with my team?" I said, of course. I said, in fact, I'm going to be in that part of the world in in a week or two, doing some work for Gillette, and I'll stop by.
Stop by.
I'll stop by. And that was in 1994. And I went to Sri Lanka after I'd done work in Shanghai and Hong Kong for Gillette, and did a program for him in Sri Lanka. And that began a relationship with his company that endured up to the pandemic. So from 94 to 2020, what is that, 26 years?
Yeah.
I worked and I helped him build his company from 28 million in revenue to 2 billion. And from a single country in Sri Lanka to having operations in 14 countries. And it got my reputation out in Asia. And so he said, Doug, I'm on the Family Company Institute board headquartered in Singapore. Could you come and do a presentation to this institute? I said, of course. So I did that, and I did a number of other things, and I became, quite by accident, kind of a specialist in working with Asian CEOs. And so I did that in about a dozen Asian countries over the years. So
the moral of the lesson is maintain good social networks and connections and say yes to every opportunity. Because not once he's like, sure, I'll be there next week.
No, I think, Danielle, I think that's right. I've always been fortunate to build good relationships and know that my clients will want me to be around if they can trust me implicitly, and if I do good work. And so building trust and strong interpersonal relationships tended to be part of my reputation.
Well,
so I did this work around the world. I think in almost every country in Europe and a dozen countries in Asia, as well as, of course, the US. So my work was really coaching executives, helping them identify the next generation of leaders, putting in place systems and procedures to do that, and to build a culture that was socially responsible, ethical, people-centered, and values-based. And that's what I learned to do. And I did it with startups in the high-tech field to Citibank and these other large companies that I've mentioned. So it was a very personal, highly engaged work that I did.
And obviously very successful at it. That's you had a lot on your plate, and you were being very successful. And then change came. Now this could be for another person, this could be just retirement time, or it could be the pandemic, or it could be both. And so there was that black cloud that none of us saw coming, wasn't there?
Yeah. So how did you, so you're traveling around the world, you're making all these great connections, you're like as successful, like at the peak of your career, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and you're kind of cut off from that. So how did you make that transition?
With great difficulty. So you can appreciate that I think this will tell you, I became a lifetime platinum with Hilton Hotels, and I became the platinum level with Emirates Airlines, and I got to know all the flight attendants on Emirates in Dubai. And so it was, Danielle, an exciting, engaging, self-affirming experience that I had with my work. And by the way, in over 120 trips to Asia during my career, my wife went with me on a third of them.
Nice.
So we would go to Sri Lanka or India or China or Cambodia or wherever. And then when my work was done, we would hire a driver and just take off and spend a week or two, seeing the world, and me doing my photography. So it wasn't just a job, it was my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I'm getting emotional about this because it was a big deal. And so when COVID hit, I was shocked. I was depressed. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. But I knew enough from my undergraduate studies in psychology and my graduate work in organizational behavior and the kind of work that I did. I knew that I needed to dig deep and explore who I was and what I could do to deal with my incredible change and law. And so one of the things that I did, because I learned this in graduate school from one of my key professors, who wrote a book about leadership called True North. And True North is who you are as a person, your values, your purpose, your priorities. And understanding your true north is critical to being a genuine, effective leader and person. And one of the things that this professor did before he was an academic, he was a CEO of a large company, and he started True North groups where people would come together and share their life experience and learn together. So one of the things that I did was I started a men's group. Well, first of all, I had to retire, and then we sold our condo in Back Bay in downtown Boston and moved to our summer home on Cape Cod. And that was a transition and change in and of itself. But one of the things that I did early on was to start a True North group. So I went to 7 of my friends and I asked them if they would be interested in putting together this group, and they all said absolutely. So I started this group, the purpose of which was to come together to share good times, to have a little scotch and vodka, to have a great meal, and then to have me facilitate a 90-minute discussion about a subject that I felt we would all be dealing with in our retirement. So they were all kind of where I was in terms of retirement. And we are, in fact, our next meeting is next Tuesday. We've been meeting for 4.5 years, once a month.
Was that all in person? Was any of it online?
All in person, Danielle, it's all in person. I think we skipped a few months during the heart of the pandemic. Yeah. But there were meetings where we wore masks and we were all vaccinated and whatever. And we kept our social distance for 18 months or so. But this has become one of the most meaningful things in our lives. And it's so this also goes to something that I learned because one of the things that I've always done when I'm going through change or want to make a change in my life or my career is I try to study. Well, what have other people done? How have people done it successfully? Uh, and so I began to read about retirement and uh, and successful aging and so on. Uh, but I want to just drop back and say that in one of these men's group meetings, it struck me. I was sharing with the group how difficult it was for me to not get on a airplane and fly to Dubai every other week and have Dr. Bose call me or my client in Sri Lanka call me and say, Doug, where are you? We need you. um, I was talking about that in the men's group, and all of a sudden this term came to mind, which was a loss of significance. And that just kind of came out. And I thought, oh my God, that's what I'm going through.
Really? Yes. And you weren't alone either, were you?
Right, right. But I think that was the beginning of the process through which I got in touch with what was going on with me emotionally and personally and professionally. And I said, okay, if I've lost this significance, what am I going to do to try to replace it with something that's meaningful and valuable? And part of that was this men's group. And another part of it was turning to my photography in a way that I was unable to do when I was working 80 hours a week, you know, uh, and uh, and joining the board of the Copley Society of Art in Boston, which is we are the oldest nonprofit art organization in the United States. And our early members were people like Monet and Manet and really kind of high-powered stuff.
Never
So,
heard of them.
sorry.
I was joking. I said never heard of them.
And but so now it's a very prominent art organization. We have 350 members around the world. And I'm one of those members, and I'm on the board, and it's very gratifying and engaging. So I began to do that, and that was the other reason, Roger, that when I got a call about would you become a help out with the leadership of the Harvard Club of Cape Cod, I said yes, because I knew that engagement and relationships like meeting you, Roger, and other people in the Harvard Club and the relationships I've developed in the Copley Society were an important part of my kind of recovery, if you will, from this loss of significance. That I knew that I needed something substantively and interpersonally engaging and rewarding in my life.
So interesting, because what we know of your photography, and I'd love to hear more about it. You had mentioned specifically that in New York City, you loved like the diverse populations and groups that you were seeing. So you were forced to connect to people in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about your photography specifically?
I was working in the mayor's office in New York City. And that's not maybe as elite as it sounds, because there were like 150 people working in the office, and I was a pretty low level person. But my job for 3 years in the mayor's office was to go out into the community and help the directors of Head Start centers, drug treatment facilities, community-based organizations, and help them learn how to manage and lead these organizations. So I hired consultants and I worked in the community and in Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant and Crown Heights and uh, around the Bronx and all over New York City. And I guess I've always been a curious person, but I just love meeting people and watching them and understanding, learning about their cultures. Uh, and and then at the same time, uh, my first child was born, my daughter. And I remember going to the hospital in Manhattan and seeing her in the incubator, or not incubator, but in the, the room where the newborns are, and seeing her for the first time. And I was just taken, I was absolutely overwhelmed. And then when we went home from the hospital, I thought, I've got to I don't know how to take a photograph of her. So my friend from across the street on the Upper West Side came over and took her photograph. And I said, well, I'm not going to let this happen again. So I bought a camera. This was in 1980-ish. I bought a camera and I didn't know how to use it. So I did some experimentation. And then the New School for Social Research, which was well known in New York at the time, had all kinds of courses in the arts. And I began to study photography there. And from that moment on till this moment, photography has become my passion. People say, oh, that's your hobby. I said, no, it's not a hobby. It's my passion. And so when I traveled around the world with my work, I would hire guides and go off and go to the Ganges River in Varanasi, India, where the Hindus were cremated and prayed and did photography, or to the Forbidden City in Beijing or where. And my photography not only was a wonderful way to discover and record the world, but became a vehicle to connect with people. So I would say, excuse me, may I take your photo? And they would either say no, 90% of the time they say yes. And so whether it's with tribes in remote Africa or in Cambodia, at Angkor Wat, or in Manhattan, or on Cape Cod, I learned to use my camera as a way to introduce myself and to connect with people and cultures. And so it became a passion. And I've always been a very competitive person.
We wouldn't have guessed. Would you, Roger?
So this competitive drive and this drive for achievement and recognition caused me to begin to say, well, how do I share my photography? And so I exhibited my prints in a gallery in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and in Chennai in India, and in New York, and so on. So it's been a passion. When I'm doing my photography, nothing else in the world exists. It's an emotionally involving experience, and I forget everything else in the world and connect with the person or the people that I'm. I've slept on the ground for 2 weeks in Omo Valley, Ethiopia, living with tribes. And they're looking at me waking up at the sunrise and, having dinner with the tribal chief and his wife and taking photos. And it's a way that I've learned to explore the world and get close to people. And so it's a passion. Uh, I've learned Photoshop, and I now do most of my post-processing myself. I sell my work, and I'm right at this moment working with a online platform, a company called uh, Art Storefront, that works with artists and photographers to develop an absolutely state-of-the-art website, and helps with marketing and selling and exhibiting. And so I'm right now working with them to kind of expand and accelerate this process of showing and selling my photography. So it's an all engaging, all inclusive process.
Well, Doug, we have a lot of people listening, and I think very few of them have sampled life the way you have. And but I can see that we all have a pulse, and that there are some clear messages that come from your story, as magnificent, and it's quite a story, Doug. I'm learning some new things, and we had
Good.
see those photos personally, although we'll give the link as to where people might be able to see them soon on a website or get to them. But, it seems to me that there are some critical messaging here that I think most of the research on healthy longevity, successful aging talks about: social connection, meaning and purpose. And it's clear that you were able to find those, and you already had such a collection of skills anyway that you brought to bear on your transition, so that you were able to flush out what your life was going to be like and how you were going to stay connected and with purpose. And that's kind of like a summary. I didn't want to summarize. I wanted you to summarize. Could you summarize for us what advice you would give anyone, if they worked in a factory for 30, 40 years and then that stopped, or they were a CEO,
Yeah.
they were a world traveler or whatever, that what advice would you give them to manage this transition, to stay healthy, of course, both emotionally, psychologically, as well as physical?
Right.
So what advice would you give?
Well, first of all, Roger, I want to be clear that for about 12 to 18 months after my career came to an abrupt end, I went through a very challenging time emotionally and psychologically, because I hadn't made that transition to full-time photographer. I was at loss, and I think that, and I know that some of my friends were. So I think that people, I don't want to present this as though I just kind of shifted gears overnight and made this transition. It was difficult. Uh, but I've watched colleagues of mine retire over the years, and those that did not do it successfully did not have a hobby or a passion or a pastime or something that they were interested in and committed to and engaged in. I can't tell you how many of my colleagues over the years said, well, I'm retiring. And I said, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to move to Florida and play golf. I thought, well, how many people have I known who were going to play golf their entire retired life?
Purpose is so powerful. As somebody who coaches one-on-one clients, and a lot of times when somebody is in a poor state of mental health and well-being, sometimes it's asking them, what's your favorite song? And also what music do you listen to? And then you'll find out, oh, well, I like to play around on the guitar. It's like, okay, when's the last time you picked up the guitar? Or sometimes they like to cook or paint. And it's like, well, when's the last time you just started painting? It doesn't have to be beautiful, just trying something new. And so you're absolutely right. Some people don't think about, but I think creativity can be and purpose is such a powerful way to work through those changes.
I absolutely Danielle. And I can tell you that there are a couple of men in my men's group who I think are still struggling because they don't have a purpose. But there are two or three others that one of the men in my group is incredibly engaged. He plays in a band. He's plays the saxophone and the piano in a band. He is a bonsai expert. He's a musician. He teaches photography. He's a landscaper. It's just incredible. But then there's another friend who is kind of, I think, kind of depressed and doesn't have a purpose or hasn't found it. My advice from my experience and my observation of others is, do not plan to retire to play golf. You can't play golf for the rest of your life, and you can't do it every day. And you've got to have a purpose, whether it's doing Meals on Wheels or some social action involvement or whatever it is. You've got to find something that is engaging and involving and meaningful. And by the way, I'm still looking for another activity in my retirement in which my photography's great for me, but it's not contributing to the betterment of the world in a significant way. So I've started a committee at the Copley Society of Art on inclusivity, diversity, and equality. And in that role, I have this idea that I can work with Artists for Humanity or some other organization to work with teenagers in the inner city of Boston, underprivileged teenagers, to have them come together, teach them photography, have them photograph their life, and then work with them to do a gallery exhibition at the Copley Society or another gallery, and do something like that as a way to use my photography to contribute to society. So you've got to find something in your retirement that you call, Danielle, purpose. And I think that's the word that I use, that has some meaning and value beyond yourself. A good friend of mine does Meals on Wheels. So he goes out and delivers meals to elderly people who are sheltered in their homes or apartments or whatever. Another of my friends is very involved in Habitat for Humanity and spends half his time helping build homes for people. But you've got to find that purpose and that something that engages you, and I think in a way contributes to the betterment of the greater good. But people who can't find that or who haven't found it struggle in retirement.
Wow. There's so many gems here, Doug. We can't thank you enough. I mean, it was a pleasure hearing about your colorful and exotic life, for sure. But when it really comes down to it, the messages, the gems that you've given us, the pearls, I guess that's a good term for it, of, social connection and purpose, and that it wasn't easy. It was a process, the transition. It's a
Yeah.
process. Don't expect to get it right away. You have to be a little patient. And this whole idea of the greater good when it comes to purpose, that is the most powerful type of purpose that you can have. I went to a Jesuit school. They drill that into you, the greater good, social justice, all that sort of thing. So
Yes, I remember you went to Holy Cross,
did, yeah, that's right. I did.
where
And
my granddaughter is going to be a senior next year.
must be very proud. How many grandkids do you have? You told me.
13.
See, grandkids. Purpose there,
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't answer your question about aging and how does one learn to maintain emotional, psychological, physical health as you age. And by the way, Roger, I learned something from you about this concept of resilience in as we age. And my best friend, who's my next door neighbor, who's in my men's group, and is the one who does the Meals on Wheels, he's been dealing with cancer for 11 years. And it comes at it, he goes to Dana-Farber in Boston and they put him on a new drug and that kind of keeps it under control. And then it reemerges and it's been a roller coaster for him for 11 years. But he does Meals on Wheels. He's a great grandparent. He goes fishing often. He plays golf. He's in my men's group. But I said to him, I introduced this concept in my men's group of resilience. And I said, and Bill, you are the best example I know in my life. And so he also has some other physical challenges, but he plays golf 3 times a week. He goes fishing. He's with his grandchildren, and he's dealing with cancer. And I think that I've learned from you and from Bill that, I had knee replacement surgery, but I try to go to the gym 5 times a week, even when I don't want to. And I'm tired and I'm kind of lethargic and I didn't have a good night's sleep. I drag myself to the gym because I know that physical exercise is not only a way to kind of maintain my health as I age, but it's better than antidepressants. Research has shown for maintaining a positive mood and emotional health. Uh, Not to mention keeping my weight down and my moderately high blood pressure under control. And so I've gotten into this kind of habit of going to the gym 5 times a week and watching my diet very carefully. My wife says I'm, neurotic about it, but it's kind of a challenge, So I've got this book on Long Live by Peter Attia, which is fantastic about learning more about longevity and what to eat and what not to eat. And right now I'm on an intermittent fast. So, and I think learning about longevity and health and what I can do to help myself emotionally and psychologically and my photography and my family, those things I've discovered are now at the heart of successful aging.
So, Danielle, we want to make sure our listeners can connect with the photography and whatever else Doug has to offer people going through this.
They can find my work on Instagram at Doug Adams Photography. So thank you for asking.
Doug, can't thank you enough. And I get the pleasure of being able to see you face to face and chat.
And you likewise.
And I'd like to see some of those photography, but the photographs that you have, and talk more about your life, a very colorful life. But I can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with us, and we're gonna make sure a lot of people know about Doug Adams.
I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for asking me to talk with you.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.